What's up, everybody? Welcome to another edition of Tequila Tuesday, brought to you by Sendoso, Scotty's Little Sales Club's official sending partner. It's been a while since we had a guest, but this is the beginning of a good run where I have, I don't know, like 8 to 10 weeks in a row where I have guests coming on. So you don't have to listen to me anymore, drone on about whatever I'm talking about. We have actual smart people coming to talk about good subjects. And today, we've got Fergus Connolly here to talk to us about peak performance. And I don't know if you all saw this morning, but I had a little LinkedIn post talking about this event. And my peak performance moment of the day was I woke up early this morning. I went to do laundry. I put all the clothes in the dryer, not the washing machine. And I put a bunch of soap, laundry soap, in the dryer and turned that motherfucker on. And that's how I started my day, basically ruining all of my appliances and having to try to figure them out. So I thought it was appropriate that today we talk to Fergus about peak performance. Fergus has worked with all sorts of organizations like elite military groups, high performing business groups, but most interesting to me, Liverpool Football Club, as well as the University of Michigan and San Francisco 49ers, Bolton Wanderers, and many, many more. Fergus, the floor is yours. Take it away.
Well, thank you so much, and I hope, Cynthia, this makes your margarita taste a little bit better. But thank you very much for having me. I was actually going to I'm actually going to change this up a little bit because I had planned I'd planned a certain talk, but you weren't kidding when you said this was a high performing group, and this looks like a great group of high performers. What I'm going to start with actually is I'm going to show you the very first talk I gave to the San Francisco 49ers. So at this stage, I'd worked with lots of different teams. Liverpool, as you mentioned, Scott, international rugby teams, Premier League soccer teams. I'd consulted with lots of NFL teams, but my first full-time role at the 49ers. So I'm there a week. And I meet the head coach, Jim Harbaugh, and I said to him, Jim, on the schedule, I need to speak to these guys about recovery and about performance. And so I'm thinking, brilliant, I'll get a slot, later on in this training camp starts. It was actually around this very same time. And he turned to me and he said, brilliant, we've got a meeting at 1 o'clock. This was at 8:30 in the morning. He said, brilliant, we've got a meeting at 1 o'clock and you've got the first 15 minutes. And I go back to my office and I'm shaking, I'm sweating. I don't know what to do. I was thinking, I've never given like a short talk like that before. So I go back and I've got a few hours and I've got to put something together. And I want to share with you, this is what I did. And I want feedback from you guys because, I want your feedback. But this was the very first talk that I give to, and remember, I'm walking into a group of Pro Bowlers. You've got Frank Gore, Vernon Davis, Colin.
What year was this, Fergus? What year was this?
This is 8 or 9 years ago. I forget. It's after this Super Bowl. So you go in and imagine it's an auditorium. So I know who these guys are, but I don't know them. I'm only there a week. And I've got all of these famous names. All of the coaches are sitting up at the back to see what's this new guy going to say. All of these guys are sitting there with their notebooks, high performers, elite performers, just like all of you guys. And in walks this small, very white Irish guy. So this is how I started.
I remember him.
Yes, Harvey Grant. So Harvey spends 9 years in the league and makes $19 million. His brother, Horace, stayed in the league for 17 years in the NBA. And made $72 million. Now, I know Al Vermeil, who was the strength coach at the Chicago Bulls, and he's the guy who gave me these numbers. And so I asked him, I said, what was the difference between both of these guys? He said, Horace spent more time in the weight room training and on his recovery. And that's how he ended up spending 8 more years in the league. But look at the difference in salary and income. And so my message to all of these guys were, if you want to do the things in your life that you want to, it's not about the money, it's about staying in the league, staying in the game, and performing at a high level. So if you don't do that, you're going to get injured like Harvey, you're going to struggle with injuries, and you're not going to be able to sustain elite performance. And if you don't sustain elite performance, this is what it's like. It's like going into games with no protection whatsoever. So you have to look after yourself, you have to protect yourself, and you have to invest in yourself. So it's not about the 2 hours training. It's about the 22 hours. It's not about the 2 hours on the field. It's about the 22 hours. That's the difference. Because everybody trains the same. Now, this is the season. This is what the season's going to look like. And the red line is what most teams do. So you think of your favorite teams, guys. Whether it doesn't matter whether this is soccer, rugby, basketball. Some teams start really well and then they start to fall off. But we're not going to do that. We're going to start, we're going to hit the season, and we're going to stay at the highest level. Because when I went to speak to the coaches at the Chicago Bulls, my question was, Michael Jordan and Scottie Pippen, how do you guys peak? Like, how do you peak at the end of the season? How do you peak when... And I remember the guy took the pen away from me and he drew a straight line. He said, we don't peak. We stay at this level and everybody else falls off. And it's about habits. It's about routine. You don't suddenly turn on something you haven't got. You sustain performance. And so our goal is to be the best prepared team in the NFL. Remember, it's not about the 2 hours, it's about the 22 hours. So, you guys, you got to think about who you are. You're not a businessman. You are the business. You got to invest in yourself. And you got to think of yourself as a business that you're going to invest in and that you're going to put the money into. Now, at this point, I've got a whole load of American athletes sitting laughing in stitches, but they get the message. You got to invest in yourself, and you can't just rely on what the team are going to do themselves for you. It has to be, what are you going to do for yourself? So I want you to think of your car. So what kind of car have you? What kind of vehicle have you? Think about it, okay? You got a Jaguar, you got a truck, you got a Chevy, whatever. Well, okay.
Does a Prius count, Fergus?
We're going to leave. I hate to break this to you guys, but there weren't too many Priuses in the parking lot of the San Francisco 49ers.
Yeah.
You had Mercedes and all kinds. But, okay, so you go out to your car, all right? And in that vehicle, you get into it, you either press a button, you stick the key in, you turn it. So the very first thing is electricity. Boom. That goes to the engine, and then you got the gas flowing. So electricity, gas. And then you got oil and you got water flowing around it. And then, as you drive that car, you've got suspension, you've got wheels, you've got the structure. So any vehicle, same with your house, but any vehicle, you've got three systems. You got the fuel system, you got the electrical system, and then you got the suspension, the structure. Well, these are the three systems that you got to think about when you're thinking about how you're going to protect and invest in your body. So, take the human body, take your body, how you're going to protect it and how you're going to recover and how you're going to perform. First thing we have to refuel and we have to refill the cells. So what is the quality of the food? What is the quality of the nutrition that you're taking in? All of the blood, all of the liquid, all of the fluid that's flowing around. That's going to provide energy to the cells. That's one system. The second one is the electrical system. And this is arguably the most important that we don't think about, but that's your nervous system. That's your brain and every single nerve that fires around your body. So your whoop band and all of these different things, that's actually what they're measuring. They're measuring the central nervous system. And this is so important for high performers because that's going to determine how well you learn, how you react, how you read things. That controls everything. Think of it. When you get in your car, the massive battery you have is only there to start it. All it takes is an 8-volt battery then to run it. But that electrical system governs everything. And then this third one is the structure, the suspension. And that's the protein, the foods that you're going to take in that are going to help repair the tissue over time. So we're going to keep it really simple. We've got 3 systems that we have to recover. We have to recover, refuel and refill, hydrate. And we got to manage that nervous system. And we have, the only way to recover that is sleep, rest, meditation, switching off. And then you got to eat protein and good food to repair, good fat to repair the actual tissue that is going to be damaged throughout the day. So again, we are not going to suddenly peak and fall off. We're going to build habits that are going to allow us to sustain high performance throughout the whole season. We're not going to fall off like everybody else. We're going to focus on these 3 systems religiously. That's going to be our habit. And we're going to focus on the metabolic, the liquids. Think of the liquids that you're going to put into your body. Then we're going to think of the electrical system, and then the structure and how we're going to repair it. That's our goal. And then I exited stage left. So one of the things that I got a confession for you guys. The knowledge and things like this are actually difficult for me because people come to me with problems. I solve problems. So presenting about performance is so many different things. But the beauty of being put in a really difficult situation where I've got 10, 15 minutes to present, everything that I took, I stole from you guys. I stole from sales and marketing. I looked at Nike commercials, Gatorade commercials, and I had to, so my question was, and this was my question actually to some of the coaches, my question was, why can I stand in front of the team maybe and talk for 90 minutes and present about science and everything, and they'll go home and eat McDonald's on the way home, and they'll sit in front of the TV, right? They'll sit in front of the TV and they'll buy a fluffy duster for a motorcycle that they don't have because somebody sold it very well to them. That was my question. And so my thing was, what can I learn from Nike, from Adidas, from Gatorade, from your community, and what can I steal and make performance sexy? And so that was the presentation. And my goal was, and this is what I want your feedback on, this is what I want to hear from you. My goal was, how can I inspire in them a desire, which was based around the financial reward, equate that to longevity, and lead them into, this is what you got to do. That was my logic. But I want to know from you, elite performers, if you're sitting in that audience, would you have bought what I was selling?
You can all take yourselves off mute. Somebody chime in.
I'm going to start calling names shortly.
Yeah, that's how I do it.
I'm going to start calling names.
People.
Connor, let's hear it.
Bring it, Connor. But take down the LA FC scarf first.
I'll throw up a worse one. I'll put a Manchester United one up there. No, I'm kidding. Queens Park Rangers, baby. They're my real team. They suck too. I would say I'm 50-50 on it. I feel like I'm like, yeah, everything on there makes total sense. I get it. That sounds important. But for me, I don't think it hit. I'm not there imagining myself as a multi-million-dollar contract NFL player. The problem didn't hit me deep enough. I'm like, I got this contract. I'm cool. Yeah, these are all things I know I should do. All right, what's the next thing? It didn't get me. It didn't feel severe and urgent and like, shit, I need to do this or else. That's what was missing for me. Everything's like, yeah, that's great. I want to make a lot of money. That's cool. But I think for me, at least the driver of wanting to aspire to something versus protecting myself from something that's going to crush me, that's where I fell. So yeah, it made sense and it impacted me, but I didn't get it in my core. But again, it's 15 minutes. So
did you hear what he just said right there? What he said in not so many words was, the fear of losing what he has is much stronger than the reward of what he stands to gain should he make changes. And to me, my belief is that's a fundamental human mentality right there. we are more motivated by fear than we are by gain. And everybody likes to say it nice and fluffy that, you know, the carrot is more rewarding than the stick. But I have not found that to be true. And Connor just said that right there. He's more worried about losing everything that he's got than getting something different, getting something more.
Who else?
Scott, I love what you just said because I totally agree. That's me in a nutshell. I want a lot of things and I have goals that I aspire to, but I am like a massive procrastinator. I hate myself for it, and I am trying to turn that around. But I think it's true. I think I'm much more motivated by timelines that have to do with me losing something, or some sort of pain associated to losing something or not achieving a certain goal or outcome. I need timelines too, and those are things I think we obviously can create for ourselves. And I'd love to learn. I mean, Fergus, if you've got tips on that, I would love to hear more about that for sure.
I will say I slammed my entire water on the water slide. I'm like, oh yeah, I haven't had water in like 3 hours. So that part got me.
Connor, stop trying to fix it after this. You hurt me. You're just not good enough. No, it doesn't work. No, but that's brilliant. No, that's brilliant feedback. And I think one of the challenges you have is when you walk into a group like that is knowing needs and fears. And I think that I wish I had studied sales marketing or whatever you want to call it. I wish I had studied it earlier, because one of the challenges that we have in sport, or I had in sport, was what I call backroom bandwidth. You've got coaches who have come through a system, playing a game, etc. And then you've got players coming through. But in the middle, then you've got these PhDs, masters, people with all this knowledge, and we fail to recognize who it is we're speaking to, and to fail to take the time to recognize those fears and needs and what they truly are. And I think that's one of the biggest mistakes. But then again, like I said, Nike, Mercedes, BMW will do it when the guys go home and turn on the TV. And the funny thing is, actually, I saw some of you laughing earlier, like nobody believes that McDonald's is good, but they'll still go and, they'll choose the easy option. Anybody else? I want one more before I go on. Stuart, brilliant.
Stuart, Scott, yeah.
Yeah, I would say I have to pretty much agree with Connor on that. The fact is does the money itself motivate these individuals, or what else could motivate them? Would the fact that they don't work out, train, and they get injured more frequently, would that be a cause? I don't know the group necessarily, but if they were interested in just pure money, then it is compelling. But I think for a lot of people, that might not be compelling, because most people know if they worked harder to this, they can make a lot more money in their lives, but most people don't. So how compelling it is, I guess, is based upon the individual.
So I think one of the challenges you have in elite sport, and I've never worked at academy but one of the challenges you have with elite athletes is that much of their initial progress has come about through talent. And I don't want to say natural talent, because they've worked really, really hard at it. So they've come through. So their shift now to recognizing these lifestyle issues are things they need. They haven't had to do that to get to this stage. The money thing is a really good point. The reason for emphasizing the financial reward was to emphasize what they could do with it in their private lives, how they could help other people. The idea, I hate to break this to you, but the idea of doing something for the jersey, for the team, yeah, that sailed with Lombardi, I think, a long time ago. But so it's a careful balance. I'm not gonna burst any bubbles, Scott, for you around Liverpool.
No, you're not bursting my bubble. I'm just having a laugh because that's what all of the companies tell us. Is to take one for the team essentially and put the team first and all that. Meanwhile, we don't get fucking paid, but they do. It's a little bit different in sport with guaranteed contracts and things like that. We don't have that situation as salespeople, as sales leaders, as marketing leaders, and so forth. So I'm very curious to hear how we pivot a little bit from sport to some of the conversations that you've had with the businesses and the business leaders and folks that you've talked to. But yeah, that was what you saw me cue in on right there.
Yeah, so it's a brilliant question, Stuart, and I can't say that I have it nailed down, but what I was trying to find was, I knew that if I just said, let's do this for the team and for whatever, you might as well, you know, float a kite. So it's trying to find that, but I think having the fear element as a push and pull, I think Connor makes a really good point, and to that, the urgency that's needed to put that in place. The good news is I got another 15 minutes later on, but that neither here nor there. But my ultimate goal was to get, like, here's the question I ask, you know, so many people. Can you get a professional athlete to eat broccoli? That's the question. Like, can you convince somebody who's not done it for 27, 28 years, can you convince them that, yes, your poor diet, blah, 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 is not going to keep you in the game? And it's a mind shift change that's needed. But I so wish I had all of your input before I stepped in front of, it was actually about 100 pro athletes, because at this time of the year, you've got, I think it's 95 guys, and then they cut it down to 55. But that's essentially what you have to do when you're in front of a group like that. Let me, any other questions?
Well, we've got a question from Steven. Steven, you want to take yourself off mute?
Yeah, sure. One, Fergus, I don't know how you would, I would be an emotional wreck if I stood in front of 55 professional football players. That would be pretty tough. So I'm glad you can do it. My question is, how do you continue to stay motivated in your own life when your discipline and like your daily habits may not always be enough to keep you motivated? Because they say when you lose motivation, that if you're disciplined enough, your routines and the day, you know, your work and effort's going to be there. But at some days that may not be enough. How do you continue to stay motivated through that?
So me personally, I think this is a really good question. And it's something that I probably only I became aware of probably 7 or 8 years ago, but myself really only had to focus on it the last 4 or 5 years. One of the things that I failed to recognize earlier with elite athletes and special operators who so elite athletes who retire and special operators who transition out and retire. One of the biggest things that you notice is the challenge they have in terms of motivation when their purpose is apparently taken away from them. So in other words, when they're in that environment, their identity and their image are the same thing, and the purpose is essentially given to them. And so they wake up each morning, it's pretty clear what they have to do, and it's explained to them, or it's black and white. So when spending time with those guys and recognizing some of the challenges they had, it made me reflect on what is my purpose and why should I get out of bed in the morning? And so spending time trying to refine and understand, what do I want to do? Like, what makes me happy? What do I want to do? All of the habits, the routines, the things you got to do, they will fail from time to time. You're absolutely right. So I think taking time to, and I'll show you this later, I think there are 3 critical questions that with high performers. One is recognizing the difference between who you are and what you do. And the third question is, why are you here? And I will ask people I work with those 3 questions. And if they give me the same answer to all 3, now you got a problem. If they said to had this conversation with, I'm trying to be careful what words I use, but with certain military personnel, who are you? And they'll say, well, I'm a Green Beret, Navy SEAL, whatever. And then I'll say, what do you do? Okay, well, it's not the same thing. Okay, let's go back again. What do you do? This is what I do. And who are you? Those are two separate things. They're not essential. They're not image and identity, but one is what you do and one is who you are. And the third one, which usually only comes to us later in life, is why are you here? Like, what's your purpose? Like, what kind of legacy in terms of world citizen? What do you want to be? That generally only comes to us later in life. I'm not saying with everybody, but that becomes the reason I want to get out of bed in the morning. For me personally, I want to help good people do great things. It's always been. I love teaching. I love helping. I love empowering. That's what gets me up in the morning. So on a difficult day, if you will, that's what's fulfilling for me. Yes, I have routines, habits, but from time to time they'll slip. I'll struggle. But I think helping people recognize those things. For others, they've got families, they've got kids. It's providing support for them. And if you study and if you look at really committed organizations or groups that have very, very high commitment, they can tolerate and suffer any amount of inconvenience to achieve that purpose, that greater purpose.
Yeah, it was a great answer. Thank you.
Anybody else?
Nothing,
okay.
Nothing at the moment.
Nothing. Right, you guys are really putting me on the spot. I got to talk now.
Yeah.
All right. Let me do what I want to share with you. I want to share with you some lessons I've learned from coaching elite performers, and let me get. So there are so many things I've learned over the years coaching elite athletes. I've been very fortunate to learn from so many. I've worked, like I said, in the Premier League, worked in international rugby, trained world champion boxers, cricket, but I've never worked at developmental and never worked at academy level. And one of the problems I had, one of the challenges I had moving initially from soccer to rugby to the NFL to NBA, NHL, was the change in culture and environment. And that was the biggest challenge. And so for me, one of the difficulties I felt I had was changing the sport. But it took me a while to realize the person is the exact same. And even now working with executives, high performers in other domains, the person is the exact same. So for me, it started to become a question of what are the principles of performance that are common to all different groups? And what are the lessons and the examples? The one advantage of the elite level is that they are in extreme situations. Now, I hate to break it to you, but I'm Irish. May have been a slight giveaway in my accent if you haven't noticed. But my initial degree was in construction and technology. I did a master's in advanced manufacturing, a PhD in computers, but my passion, my interest was always sport. I was always interested in what the human is like and what's the potential, what's the most a human can do. So I would travel around the world. I would put down a list of, I would read back when you had these things called newspapers. I would buy 3 Sunday newspapers. I told you, you're all younger than I am. Even Scott, if he shaves his beard, is so much younger than I. But what I would do, this is honestly what I would do. My father would go crazy because on Sunday when he would go and look at the paper, I had taken out the sports sections and had gone into the other room and I was looking for the big interviews with the athletes. And I would look for the names of the coaches and what they're doing. So I had a list of who are the best coaches, not theorists, but who are the best coaches. And I would go and try and learn from them. And I would save up my money eventually. I had a little envelope where I genuinely would save dollars or euros. And then I would save them and go and I would send letters and emails. And not one of them charged me. They would say, if you can make it here, you can come and learn from me. But before we get into all of the things I've learned, there are a few myths about high performers that really bug me. One is that high performers never take days off. And it's complete nonsense. They will always do something, but it's never a case that they work continuously. You cannot. I've tried to do it, and I've ended up doing what the cab driver in Dundalk did with Scott, to worse consequences. You cannot do it. And I remember actually I gave a talk to a special operations group, and I remember one of the guys, we were talking about it, and he said, there's a reason we have 6-month deployments. Like, we will work hard for a period, but we have to have downtime. So you have to schedule periods of downtime. And Stephen, that's really important as well, because, and I think Craig mentioned it earlier as well, you have to reaffirm and you have to reinforce what your purpose is and your reasoning. Like, on a deeper level, you need the time off to be able to do that. But this idea that people don't take days off, it's nonsense. And it's where the most creativity happens. The other one that annoys me, sorry, I'm on a rant here for a minute, so just bear with me, but elite performers are born different. The number of times I sat with guys in locker rooms and we would talk, and they would say things to me like, well, Fergus, I wasn't even the best in my high school, or I wasn't the best at my university. Like Frank Gore, I think, had 3 ACL surgeries before he gets to the 49ers and then plays for, 15, 16 years. And they will all tell you that they weren't born differently. Now, yes, if you're 4'6", I hate to hurt your feelings, but you're not going to make it in the NBA. But apart from that, and one of the things as well, just so you know, when I was at the Niners, we had a group came to us, really smart guys. They came with genetic testing. So at the time, genetics and genetic profiling was all the rage, and you were able to identify genes that said that you were fast, whatever. And these guys wanted us to invest in the project, and they were willing to come and test our athletes. Now, first of all, our guys are elite athletes. You can imagine, guys are not going to want their DNA being tested for other reasons. But these guys, I was saying to them, even if you can tell me this guy's fast, they've already made it to this level. And very often they make it in spite of, because elite performers are elite compensators. They compensate for, perhaps their linear speed, for example, is poor, but they make up for it with awareness and perception and their game knowledge. Perhaps they are fast, and that compensates for poor vision. Elite performers find a way to make it to the top level. So they're not born differently. There's no genetic advantage in most cases. The other one is that they're perfect all of the time. Complete nonsense as well. They make mistakes. In fact, they choose to make mistakes and continue to develop, but they do it in what they define as safe environments. So they'll do it in practice. They'll do it at lower levels. If you take, there's comedians, they will go to the smallest, dingiest bars and practice their poor material to get it out of the way. They purposely look to fail. So they're not perfect all of the time. And in fact, the ability to manage and develop resilience is essential. So all of these guys I told you about that weren't the best at high school, that weren't the best at university, and still make it to the NFL or the NBA, they learn how to overcome setbacks. And it's the ability to overcome setbacks that, if you want to identify anything, that's critical. Some of the guys used to talk to me about a last man standing mindset. It's the ability to overcome the setbacks that you're going to face. And the other one is that they never cheat or make mistakes. They all, from time to time, will have cheat meals. They will all do things. They will all take breaks. They need to unwind. So they are not perfect. They don't have this amazing gift. They have resilience, and they recognize that they are going to fail over time. The other one that we work on, and we have to work on, is finding balance. But initially, most elite performers are not perfectly balanced. They've got an over-reliance on a certain skill set that gets them to a point, and they're very imbalanced in terms of relying on natural ability. But the best ones start to recognize that and then develop other skill sets as they go along. So those are just some of the myths, and I could go on. There's so many things I hear, and people read ESPN articles or Sports Illustrated articles about some guy who's training 24/7, doesn't sleep. You know, the reality behind the curtain is much, much different. So here are five lessons I've learned. It's never actually about the game. When you get to the highest level and when you're playing the game, most of the issues that you're going to have are off the field issues. So the players that I've worked with, they can play the game. Very often the job is, can you support them around it? So back to the idea of the 22 hours. Elite performers know their job. They know how to play the game. They've been playing it for long enough. So you take this example here, okay? So I've got Vernon Davis at the San Francisco 49ers. I come in to work with Vernon. Now, for him to do this, right, he has to know where to be. He has to have tactical knowledge. He has to have the technical ability to catch the ball. Psychologically, he has to be able to manage all the pressure, stress, and strain. He has to be able to recall a play. And then, of course, the one that we see and that we get drawn to is this physical ability. We think, oh, the reason that he caught the ball or the reason that he made the great play was his speed. But it's not. It's all of these four things working together. So he can play the game, and he has to pull all of those together to be able to perform at the highest level. And all of these work intimately together. So elite performers, they have the knowledge, they have the experience, they have the training, and most teams will do the very same thing. They can't train any longer than anybody else. Most of the meetings and everything's the same. It's what they do away. So it's what we do in the 16 hours away that are going to impact our ability to perform on a day-to-day basis. When you can perform at the highest level, from a coaching perspective, one of the first questions for me is, how can I ease the 16 hours? So sleep, food, recovery, relationships, those things. How can I improve those? Because you can do your job. You wouldn't be in your job if you can't do it. So how can I help those other ones to create the foundation for you to perform at your highest? The great ones are never the best. So one of the things that when we see players perform at the highest level, we think that, oh, they're the best at what they do. And it's the same in the special operations community. They will tell you that I'm not the best at one particular thing. It's my ability to pull everything together to execute and my ability to adapt. One of the big issues I see in the corporate world is this idea of availability, or I'm always available, I'm always present. That to me is a red flag. If somebody's always there and if they're always present, I'm worried about that person, because you're human, you have ups and downs. If you don't take vacation, if you don't ever get sick, you're not performing at your highest level all the time. You need to be able to manage your time, and you need to be able to manage, and you need to have that resilience to be able to overcome. So I worked with two of these guys. Scott, you get one Liverpool photo to keep you happy.
Well, I'm just hoping that you pick the right two.
Yeah, well, let's take Stevie as an example, right? Steven Gerrard played at Liverpool for God knows how many years, and he's gone on to become a great coach. But one of the key things with Steven was his understanding of the need to spend time on recovery, regeneration, diet. I remember talking to him about fish oil. My way actually to get him to engage in fish oil was to use fish oil gummies for his kids, for his girls, and casually say, by the way, you know, the DHA in this fish oil would be great for your kids and brain development and learning. It'd actually be really good for you as well, by the way, in terms of keeping good fats on board, helping your muscles recover, your joints, and it's really, really good. I'll send you a graphic actually later, small thing. Actually, oh, I forgot I had this. This book, Legacy, this was actually produced for him. So this is a set of lifestyle tools and lifestyle habits for him. But it's the same with Frank Gore. Frank would look after himself. Sure, he'd have a good time from time to time, but his emphasis away. But it's about recognizing that when you start to plateau, there are other things that you can add, and they're not always to do with your job. You can do your job. Sometimes it's about taking handbrakes off. Same with Jordan, Tom Brady. Michael Jordan is probably the clearest example in terms of development. Comes into the league, can jump, can fly. And what does he do then as everybody else starts to adjust to him and stop him, then he has to become the best defensive player. Then he has to invent a fadeaway. So it's the ability to adapt and continue to grow, that continuous learning that becomes critical. And this is how I explain it. You've got, over your time, you'll make a sudden rise, you learn your industry, you learn your area. Some people will fall off, they'll struggle, others will just plateau. But the truly elite, the greats, they have to stay in the game. So they have to continue to grow. They have to recognize, okay, I've made it to the first point. Now it's largely about lifestyle. It's about the other supporting factors. And then later on, then it becomes about purpose. Like, why do I want to keep playing? Why do I want to keep earning money? What are the motivating factors? And how can I pull those together? So the best keep developing. They keep better by making mistakes, by using what is called differential learning. So by moving slightly outside the box and continuing to grow. So make mistakes, make a lot of them. But as one coach used to say to me, you make mistakes, but never make the same mistake the second time. If it didn't work, make a different mistake. But you never ever stop and become complacent and fall into this mindset of, I'm too scared to try something, because you're never going to grow. You have to stay a little bit uncomfortable as you keep growing. Back to Connor, you'll be happy to know I already learned from your input, but understanding fears and needs and what are the motivations and drivers. So this becomes really important when trying to help athletes to understand the athlete so that you can bring them one way or the other. For me, fundamentally, this starts with survival. So you come out of the womb, your sole goal is to survive. And there are three kind of themes that I look for. One is that we have a dependency. So when we start out, we have a dependency on other people, and then we've got a fear of rejection, and then we also have a fear of instability. So if I've got an elite athlete, they're usually worried about instability is their contract. Like, where's the security coming from that? Or rejection, am I being rejected by my teammates? Do I feel spiritually part of this? Or how dependent am I on certain people? And so recognizing which of these three key factors are driving for perhaps their inability to work as part of a team, or their fear or their insolence, or the fact that they're not engaging in what it is that we're selling. So how can I engage with them, and how can I push either the fear or the need? So encourage them to have independence, help them understand that they have been accepted, and help provide security and understand how they can gain that themselves. So by understanding which of these three factors are driving the issue, can I help motivate and provide solutions for them? So understand what their biggest fears are, and help them understand, okay, this is the pathway forward, the desire that they need. So we all have fears and needs. These are the subconscious drivers, and recognizing them help us engage better with people and engage with the help that we're trying to provide for them. The fourth one was one I learned from a sprint coach. When you work with an elite sprinter, they're usually doing an awful lot. They're putting a lot into their training. So they've got weights, they've got running fast, they've got all these things. And that very often leads to overtraining of some kind. So the first step is to remove these roadblocks or handbrakes to allow them express themselves and run faster. So very often when you remove training from athletes, they'll actually just run and perform better. But then if you remove things, they're going to fill their time with something else. So the first thing is identify what you can remove, but then don't remove it. Give them something of a lower intensity to do. Otherwise, they're going to find something to do that they shouldn't be doing. So you remove the high intensity stuff and replace it with something else. So if I've got somebody, for example, who's got a sleep issue, and I want them to stop watching TV or remove electronics, I have to replace it with something else. So we look for, with our players, we try and break them down again into these 4 things: tactically, technically, physically, and psychologically. And we look for what are the areas of development. This is an example of a scouting document we would use for an inside linebacker. So this is how we profile. This is what we're looking for. So we're looking for these tactical elements, these technical elements. So if you're an inside linebacker, this is ideally what we want. And then psychologically and physically. But we keep those profiles, and then what we do is we use those as performance passports as we move along. So we profile the player along these 4 different areas. Tactically, what is your experience? What is your knowledge? Is that the area you need to grow in? Or technically, is it a skill that we need to work on? Physically, are there areas, or is it psychological? Which of these 4 areas are holding you back? And we color code it simply down the side. And when we know what they are, then we stress them in practice. We don't, if you've got an issue around emotional control, we don't send you for 20 minutes with a psychologist in a dark room. We stress it in context. It has to be specific to the actual action. Otherwise, you're going to be brilliant in 20 minutes in a dark room, but you're not going to be able to apply it. So how can you develop? What are the things that you need to develop in terms of your hard skill, your tactical knowledge, your amplifier skills, your physical or your mental? And what are the 2 things that you're going to work on over the next 6 weeks? And we only pick 2 things. So the focus is always on find your pain points first before somebody else finds them for you. And then assess the person, assess the actual points in the whole so that you understand where they're failing. Because there are lots of people who are mentally tough, but you put them in the context and that becomes their weakest point. The last thing is, and this becomes important over the length of your career, you live in these 3 worlds. We were talking about Stephen earlier. The 3 questions are, who am I, what do I do, and why am I here? I'm not going to go very deep and spiritual, but they become factors in terms of what motivates you. So if you think of the 3 worlds, the more content you are across the 3, the more you'll be able to go to work, contribute to society, and contribute to your family with a level of contentment. We're never going to be pure happy all of the time, but we want to find contentment. Happiness is fleeting, but the goal is to find contentment across the 3. So it's your personal, professional, and purposeful world. And they impact outside because you've got beyond that, then you've got the team that you work with, you've got your relationships and family, and then you've got society and you as a world citizen. So first of all, focus on yourself. We break it down into what are your hard skills and your amplifiers. The amplifiers, what is your motivation, what's your communication, your ability to adapt, your critical thinking, and then your creativity. And from that onwards, then we can then develop leadership and teamwork. In terms of purpose, what are your intrinsic, extrinsic values? What's driving you? What's your purpose? How do you see yourself as a citizen? What's the legacy you want to leave? And then in your personal life, that's your physical and mental understanding of who you are. So how do you react? What works for you in terms of your diet, your lifestyle, your mindset? How do you progress? And those 3 things have to come together for you to be able to excel as a high performer, because those are the things that will cause the greatest issues and challenges. Like I said, the majority of issues, 99% or 90% of the issues, are not around your ability to do your job. It's the other supporting things. And you want to be able to optimize those 3 worlds. Have I lost you guys?
No, hardly. I'm furiously taking notes over here. Any questions for Fergus at this point in time. Anybody want to chime in? I don't want to dominate the conversation with all my notes. Go ahead, Amanda.
Hey there, my name's Amanda. I apologize for joining a few minutes late, but the last point that you were making really did resonate. I think if I look back on my career and when I was performing at my best, it was also a time in my life when I had all the other shit figured out in my personal life and my purpose. So, just thinking about that, it makes sense. And times when I should have been better in my career, but wasn't as successful. If I look back, I think, wow, that's because I didn't have it together and I was struggling in other areas. So that's really valuable.
Thank you, Amanda. I think that for me, this, regardless as to the sport I was working in, most elite athletes or elite performers can do their job very well. But very often then you've got issues off the field or guys coming in. This is
well, listen,
okay.
All of these people are salespeople and sales leaders. We all know very well that we can do our job on the field pretty well. And we're all a fucking mess, or have been a fucking mess, or will be a fucking mess in the future at some point. So that's all very relatable to the off-field issues and all that kind of stuff,
This also makes me think about, like, when I'm doing my one-on-ones with my team, that it's not just about how things are going at work. I really make a concerted effort to talk to them about how they're doing as human beings and how they're feeling about something that might have happened in the world, and try to think of ways in which I can take care of them from just a human to human standpoint, not just I'm your sales leader, what are your metrics looking like, but I care about you as a human. And that all wraps back into what you were just saying as well.
So there was a coach, sprint coach years ago. I went to Canada to spend time with him. He had trained world record holders. And so I go to him to learn about sprinting technique. So you watch guys run and you spot, oh, this muscle's tight, that muscle's tight. And so I'd spent a week with the guy and I'm learning, and I think I'm smart. I think I'm super smart. So towards the end of the week, he shows me this guy running in the Olympics that he had coached. And so I'm getting a little bit cocky, and he shows me the front on running of the guy coming. And I said to him, trying to show off, I said, oh, I see his left leg is moving out slightly. Here, I guess you fixed that left, external rotation. And he turned gently to me and he looked at me and he said, the guy has just run 9.79, Fergus. You think I'm going to fix that? And his point to me was, you've got a quantitative and a qualitative assessment. So somebody can hit a mark, can hit a time, but be performing poorly. And so we shifted with a lot of teams to always including a qualitative assessment along with the metrics, the actual metrics, because the rush has been in sport and human performance to put a quantitative measure in everything. But without the qualitative measurement, we weren't able to improve, because we just saw a target hit and then we'd push the guy a little bit more. But without the qualitative assessment, they broke. And so there has been, and we all love to measure things because it gives us a sense of security, but you got to weigh the number as well with how does it feel, what's the personal feedback, and it can be a challenge, but it's important to keep in mind.
Scott, you mind if I jump in here on this one and ask a couple of questions real quick? Cool. So this is directed to, and Amanda, you went down this avenue, which is great. And Fergus, maybe you can help. And Scott, this is kind of a three-pronged question here. But when is the line drawn from like the company's perspective on the outside of work? And I'm actually asking this from a real situation right now where I've got an employee who's kind of had just the stumbles from outside of work that have really affected the on-field performance, let's call it. And one thing that I'm balancing now is basically like, these are things that are outside of my control. I can only necessarily be there in so many aspects. So in today's society, let's just play the game of like, how far do you think companies should be taking that to add that support for that 16 hours in certain cases? because we have the quantitative, we have the qualitative metrics that aren't necessarily being met. But we also know that the home front, is very messy at this moment. So, like, how much room do you give on that side, or how much room should we be expecting these days?
Well, I'll just give you my perspective from it in a team environment. First of all, the attitude always would have been in a sporting environment, we're paying this guy, $16 million a year. If he can't sort it out, that's his fault, which is fine. But ultimately, we suffer. So my attitude always was provide the support and try and help them, even though it's off the field and it's not our responsibility. The question comes, do they recognize it and do they want to fix it? And you cannot, unless they want to, that's the line. The other really important point, though, is that a lot of leaders tend to miss is whether you like it or not, everybody else is watching you. And if you offer help to someone else and you support them and they come back on board and they become a success, now you've demonstrated to others that you can be there for them and they can be more willing to come to you. On the other hand, if you just cut someone loose and you're cold or callous or it's not explained or people aren't aware, that can do a lot of damage. I've seen that in many situations where people go, oh, okay, I'm not going to come forward when I've got an issue or and it might be a small issue. But for me personally, I will always try and support, but I have to draw the line with where I use the analogy of somebody who's struggling in the water. I want to help them, but if they're not going to help themselves, they cannot pull me. They cannot pull us and cannot pull me down. But if they don't want help, well then, yeah, you're going to struggle. Amanda, Scott.
Good. Jory, did you have like part 2 and 3?
No, I would just say that's just a great point, and I can add context to it, but this doesn't need to be a specific situation about me or anything like that. I was just curious, just kind of hear the perspective. I'm always about helping the people outside of work. I think obviously that's where things get done, and I've played sports at a decently high level, nothing like Scott in these majors, but they, that's a big part of how I support and how I lead. It's just becoming one of those things where there's been, in this particular situation, it's just been a lot of consistent issues, which are starting to become, patterns. But at the same point, like it's real shit at the end of the day. Like there's nothing on that side of it. So, and some of it's stuff that I can't fix. Like it's other than saying like, hey, let's use some PTO, let's give some more days off. Like, there's certain avenues that we can take on that side. But again, like in terms of just trying to protect the team and not be taken advantage of fully on that side as well, because there's only so many things I can ask as well from like an HR perspective, right? Like there's only so many details that you can gather from the head of sales seat to support, within boundaries. So that was why I asked the question, but I think that's a great answer in general too. And Amanda, I think you're too, just on, of course, always seeing how I'd like to be treated. I totally agree on that side.
Other questions from the group?
I have a quick one. Sorry I was late, so I missed your initial push there. My apologies. But I have a few questions. I don't take up too much time. You're talking about rest, not working 1,000 hours a day or whatever the bromide is. Do you find that people who are generally the highest performers, that they look for rest in variation and not like, I'm just going to sit and do nothing? They seek relatively high levels of engagement, even when it's a relative rest from their main endeavor? Or do they just like totally pull the cord out and just veg, watch a little Netflix and take it from there? What's your experience about the energy level around rest, or the nature of those rest periods?
That's a great point. So get really philosophical for 2 seconds. The Greeks used to talk about stress, two types of stress: eustress and distress. So strictly speaking, anything you do is a stress. But for some people it's eustress, good stress, and for other people it's distress. We did a study years ago with 2 players, and we put monitors on them, and I sent them home for 24 hours. And I was looking for something else, but the measurement was going to measure the amount of stress. One guy was a little bit older, legendary player, a little bit older. He went home and he told me, he said, "Fergus, this is a bad day to do this." I go, "Why?" He said, "I'm going home to my kid's birthday party. It's going to be a freaking nightmare." And so I said, "Look, please, yeah, okay, I'll help you out." So the guy's going home to his kid's birthday party, chaos. The other guy was a great player, professional, was very, very bright, very qualified, got brilliant university marks. He was going home to spend the evening at home, sitting on the couch, probably spend half the evening on Tinder, who knows. Anyway, the guys come back 24 hours later, and we just look at their profile. The guy who went home to the kid's birthday party had far less stress and discomfort than the guy who went home and spent the evening sitting on his couch watching TV. And the reason for it is, again, what is stressful for one person is not. He went home, had a good time, kids running around, went for a walk with the family afterwards and was relaxing. The other guy who went home, sat on his couch, watched TV, was not relaxing, not switching off, had either anxiety or whatever. And the 2 important points are, one, what is stressful for one person, can be complete relaxation for the other. Porrick Harrington, Ireland produces the best golfers in the world anyway, but Porrick Harrington, legendary golfer, he would tell stories about how, the night before competitions, a lot of the golfers would go and play cards. He's in his room. He said, "I cannot think of anything more stressful to do than play cards the night before go and play golf." So again, that's why I say the question of who you are, that's what I mean. Like, who are you? Like, what works for you? What doesn't work? That's so important to know. And the more that you, I'm not trying to sound like Yoda, but the more that you know about yourself, the better then you can choose the stress and make it eustress, not distress. Now, fundamental to everything is your mind model, how you look at the world. But the answer is it varies. And I know nobody wants to hear, "Oh, it depends." But it really does. And the more that you know, and the last point on this is, that's why sometimes helping or recognizing that your idea of a fun activity could be a nightmare for somebody else. Like, you mean, and so
almost certainly.
so just recognizing that is important. Yeah, Jory. Yeah, Rory could need my help. Yeah.
Cam dropped some buckets on him, man. You need to help him.
So thank you. That's a terrific answer. I appreciate that. And one more, just as an aside, there's a likelihood that you're familiar with Tim Grover, who worked with the Bulls and et cetera. What are your thoughts on his work? Or has he been does that track for you? Is that, because I found found some utility in what he had to say. So anyway, I was curious if that. It seems like that's in your universe. Is he a person that that resonates with your ideas of the world, or what are your thoughts on that generally?
Yeah, I think. Listen, I think there's so much great knowledge and information out there, and to be able to learn from. In fact, you can't find the very first book he wrote, which was called Jump Attack, and I remember buying it like 25 years ago. I think the key for, I think the most important thing for people is to be able to take the information in and understand. Think of it like a seed. You've got a specific seed, but you also have the terrain or the ground that you're going to plant it in. So not everything works. And that's why reflect on how, for example, surfing, could be the scariest thing somebody could do. I'll give you another example, like meditation or yoga. That can be a nightmare for some people to actually try and do, and they get frustrated when they can't find peace and quiet. Same with cold baths or cryotherapy. Sometimes they will work very well for some people, but then for others, they'll struggle with it. And so it's recognized, and also you can develop an ability, like you can work on, and then eventually meditation will work. But there's some people, like, I love when people say, oh, you must do this. No, you got to do what works for you. But this idea that you must do it, that it works for everybody, no, it works for some people, but not for everybody. When it comes to recovery modalities and all these things, it's timing and dose. It's just like the only difference between medicine and poison is timing and dose.
What else? I've got about 10 minutes or so left on our clock before I've got to go and take my son to his game. Any other questions? Or Fergus, you got more for us?
Well, just let me tell you, so about cryotherapy. What cryotherapy does is, cryotherapy is like if you're in a state of excitation, like in your buzzing in your innate type personality, cryotherapy like shocks the body, and it is a reset button, and it'll work really well for certain people. But there's other, like we would do it with soccer players at Bolton Wanderers, and other guys who struggle with it, it's the worst thing they can do. And so and then for them, hot works. And so knowing that cryotherapy has that effect on you is brilliant, because now you know which tools you can use, and knowing when to do it as well.
Hey, Fergus, I think cryo is great. I'm in the medical space, so I totally get it. They have new cryotherapy too for inflammation of the face. So, as we get older and we age differently, or after you've had treatment or surgeries, you can now start to use cryotherapy for inflammation throughout the whole body. It's huge. That market is becoming very high level. My company works with a company called R2 Technologies. It's called the Glacial RX, and it's a cryotherapy machine that basically treats rosacea, inflammation, acne, scarring. I mean, there's a slew of new indications that are coming out for cryotherapy. I wouldn't be surprised if we see cryotherapy over the next 5 years replacing some of the older technologies like IPL and photofacials, because it's safer for the skin. So good stuff, Fergus. I appreciate it.
Yeah, we used to, way back, we had cryotherapy chambers. We'd also use like cold wet towels on faces to stimulate parasympathetic nervous system and all that. And we used to joke, the only difference between, you got to be careful. A little bit is great and stimulates recovery, and too much is waterboarding. So you gotta know how much, like, again, timing and dose. So guys, I think Scott's going to give us about 10 more minutes. I don't know if there's any other questions that you guys have.
Hey Fergus, I got a question. I don't know if anybody else is thinking about this, but one of the things that's stuck with me this entire presentation is how you talk about elite performers the entire time. And you hinted about it a little bit, but do you ever run into people who are feeling imposter syndrome on where they are? And when you say elite, maybe they don't feel elite in that way. Maybe they are at the highest level. Maybe they aren't, in the Super Bowl or whatever it is, but you're labeling somebody as elite, and maybe they don't feel that way. So how do you deal with those situations?
So an elite performer to me is somebody who has a highly practiced set of skills for a particular context. So you are an elite performer. You have practiced and refined a set of skills for a particular context, so you're an elite performer in that world. And one of the problems that some people have is that when they're so good in a particular field and they move to another field and they struggle, then they start to lose self-esteem, self-worth, and all of that. But it's remembering that you are an elite performer in your field. And so that becomes important. In terms of imposter syndrome, I think everybody suffers with imposter syndrome from time to time. I don't know if any of you have seen The Offer on HBO recently. It's the story of the making of The Godfather. So I was it's a fabulous series, but listening to the audiobook. And actually at the back of the book, they've got an interview with Mario Puzo, the author, his son. So Mario Puzo writes 2 novels. Both of them they're brilliantly written. Critics love them, but no sales. So he decides, okay, I'm going to write this book, The Godfather, about the mob, and I wanted to write it. Nobody had written about it before, so he writes the book. And within 2 years, Paramount have bought it, they're making a movie, and so by 72 or something, it's one of the best-selling movies of all time, whatever. So Paramount come to him and say, look, we want you to write The Godfather 2. And Puzo gets hit at this stage by imposter syndrome. He's worried, he's struggling, I've got here, this is a fluke, nobody believes me. So he goes out and he buys a book on how to write screenplays, and and when he opens up the book, the very first example is one of the best screenplays ever written is The Godfather. This is the guy we're going to use. So everybody struggles with imposter syndrome, but that's why I think purpose is so important, and recognizing what your North Star is and moving in that direction, and relying on what you've done and your achievements. Nobody knows it all. For me, I've got hit with it lots of times, but that's what I fall back on. This is what I morally and ethically believe to be right and want to do, and this is my experience, and that's what I'm going to share. And so those are the 2 things that I use if I ever get hit with imposter syndrome.
All right, Fergus, bring us on home. Tell people how to connect with you. Give us your parting thoughts.
Well, first of all, I want to thank you so much for your feedback and for your questions. I probably got more from this than you guys did. And I only regret that I didn't have your input before I stood in front of the 49ers, whatever it was, 2014 or whenever that was. But thank you so much. My email link, connect with me on LinkedIn or Twitter or Instagram. Notes are in the chat. But I just want to thank all of you for engaging, for your comments. Scott, thank you so much for having me. From one former Liverpool employee to a Liverpool fan. Thank you.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you next time on Tequila Tuesday. Thanks, Fergus. Talk to you all soon.
Thank you, guys.